Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to make an announcement. The voice of my husband, Ryan Carter, cut through the hum of conversation, instantly drawing attention. The setting? A lavish anniversary party at the Astoria, one of New York's most exclusive restaurants. The occasion? 12 years of marriage. The atmosphere? Warm, elegant, filled with laughter and the clinking of wine glasses. But this wasn't part of the plan. I set down my wine glass, my fingers resting lightly on the stem, and turned toward him. Ryan stood at the head of the long banquet table, his stance confident, his expensive blazer fitting him perfectly. He was always good at looking the part, like the ideal husband, the successful coach, the man in control. But what really caught my eye wasn't his polished appearance. It was the thick envelope in his hand. A subtle hush fell over the room as guests exchanged puzzled glances. I could almost hear the collective intake of breath, the quiet anticipation hanging in the air. Ryan exhaled theatrically, as if what he was about to say required great courage. Then, he turned to me, his voice calm, deliberate. "Olivia, we've had 12 incredible years together. But I think it's time for us to go our separate ways. I've found someone who truly understands me. I want my freedom." The weight of his words settled like a heavy fog over the room. For a split second, silence stretched between us. Then, the whispers began. I didn't need to turn my head to know what was happening. I could feel the shift in the air. Our friends, our colleagues, my business associates, they were shocked. Some looked horrified, others intrigued. A few discreetly raised their phones, recording what they clearly sensed was about to be a public spectacle. Ryan was savoring this moment. He thought he had the upper hand. Slowly, he placed the envelope on the table in front of me and slid it across, his fingers lingering as if emphasizing his control over the situation. Divorce papers. Right here. Right now. I glanced at the envelope, then back at him. His posture was relaxed, self-assured. His expression smug, like a man who believed he had orchestrated the perfect coup. He expected me to react, to cry, to plead, to lash out in a fit of anger and humiliation. He wanted to watch me break. What he didn't know was that I had already seen this coming. I picked up my wine glass, swirling the deep red liquid inside, watching as it caught the light. I took my time, letting the moment stretch, feeling Ryan's impatience flicker beneath his mask of confidence. Then, I smiled. The kind of smile that made the whispers stop. That made people lean in, confused. That made Ryan hesitate for the first time that evening. I set my glass down, tilting my head ever so slightly. How interesting. My voice was steady, controlled. I reached for the envelope, flipping it open without urgency, scanning the pages. Then, I lifted my eyes to meet his. "You really thought I didn't know?" For the first time, Ryan's confident facade cracked. A flicker of something crossed his face, hesitation, doubt, maybe even fear. Because he had just realized one very important thing. I was already ahead of him. And the game had only just begun. I let the divorce papers rest on the table, my fingers lightly tracing the edge of the crisp white sheets. Ryan was still standing, his smug expression faltering just slightly, but he recovered quickly. He had planned this moment, after all. He had envisioned me falling apart, stammering, maybe even begging him to reconsider. He wanted the power, the control, the satisfaction of knowing he had shattered me in front of an audience. But I had no intention of giving him what he wanted. I exhaled slowly, not in shock or sadness, but in quiet amusement. "You're right, Ryan," I said, my voice smooth, unshaken. "It is time for us to go our separate ways." I watched as his eyebrows twitched ever so slightly, not expecting me to agree so effortlessly. He was waiting for the outburst, the heartbreak, the tears. Instead, I lifted my wine glass again, taking a slow sip, letting the silence stretch long enough for the tension to thicken. The whispers around us grew louder, people exchanging glances, trying to make sense of my reaction. Ryan shifted on his feet. Olivia, he said, his voice forced into a tone of false sympathy, I know this must be hard for you. But I need to be honest with myself. And with you. His hand brushed against the papers on the table, as if to reinforce his decision. I want to do this the right way. We can split everything fairly. I almost laughed at the audacity. Split everything fairly? He actually believed he was entitled to half of what I had built, half of what I had worked for while he chased his midlife crisis fantasy. I placed my glass down and folded my hands in my lap, tilting my head slightly. You mean, you want half of what's mine, I corrected, watching as the muscles in his jaw tensed. Ryan sighed, playing the role of the reasonable man dealing with an emotional wife. Olivia, we built a life together. You wouldn't be where you are without me. That was when I truly smiled, because now, I knew exactly where this was going. I had been prepared for this moment for months. I had seen the signs before he even realized he was giving them. The late-night gym sessions, the sudden obsession with looking younger, the secret phone calls, the unexplained credit card charges. He thought he was being clever, that I was too busy with my thriving practice to notice. But I noticed everything. 6 months ago, I had already started planning. The first step? Moving all my personal savings into a separate account. The second? Restructuring the legal ownership of my business to ensure that it remained entirely mine. And the third? Hiring a private investigator to confirm what I already suspected. Ryan wasn't just leaving me, he had been siphoning money for months, preparing for his grand escape with a woman half his age. I reached into my clutch, pulling out my own envelope, nearly identical to the one he had placed before me. With slow precision, I slid it across the table toward him. He frowned, his confidence flickering as he hesitated before picking it up. The moment he opened it, his entire demeanor shifted. This wasn't just divorce papers. It was evidence. Photographs. Bank statements. Receipts from lavish dinners and hotel stays under fake names. Screenshots of his messages, where he so arrogantly detailed his plans. His fingers tightened around the pages, his face paling as he flipped through the neatly documented proof of his deception. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice just enough so that only he could hear. You wanted to blindside me, Ryan? You should have known better. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard, his hands gripping the evidence of his own downfall. He had walked into this night expecting to humiliate me, expecting to control the narrative. Instead, he had walked straight into his own trap. And the best part? I wasn't done yet. Ryan's fingers trembled slightly as he turned the pages, his once smug expression now replaced with something far more satisfying, panic. I watched as his eyes darted across the documents, absorbing every damning piece of evidence laid out before him. The hotel receipts, the credit card statements, the flight bookings, all linked to her. He knew exactly who I was referring to. Emma Hayes. The 22-year-old personal trainer he had been sneaking around with for months. The girl who was naive enough to believe she was special, that he would leave his wife and take her on some fantasy escape to Miami. Too bad reality wasn't as kind. Ryan let out a sharp exhale, crumpling the edges of the papers in his grip as if that would make them disappear. He leaned in, lowering his voice, his fake composure cracking. Olivia, where did you get this? I took my time, picking up my wine glass again, swirling the liquid inside before answering. Oh, Ryan. When you spend years working in surgery, you develop a keen eye for detail. I met his gaze, unblinking. You really thought I wouldn't notice the late-night gym sessions? The sudden changes in your spending habits? The way you started locking your phone like a teenager hiding secrets? I set the glass down with a quiet clink. You underestimated me. And that's your biggest mistake. His nostrils flared as he glanced around, suddenly hyper-aware of the murmurs rippling through the room. People were still watching, their eyes flicking between us like they were witnessing a scene straight out of a movie. And in a way, they were. Except this wasn't scripted. This was his downfall, unfolding in real time. Ryan leaned in closer, lowering his voice further. "We don't have to do this here," he hissed through clenched teeth. I tilted my head, pretending to consider his request. Then I smiled. "Oh, but you started this here, remember?" My voice was smooth, calculated. "You wanted an audience. You wanted to make a statement. So let's not stop now." His jaw clenched, his fingers gripping the papers so tightly his knuckles turned white. For the first time tonight, he was the one losing control. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling softly. "You see, Ryan, I was never going to let you take anything from me. While you were busy sneaking around, thinking you were playing some clever game, I was making sure you walked away with nothing." I crossed my arms, watching him shift uncomfortably. "You wanted freedom? You got it. But don't expect to take my money with you." His breath came heavier now, his carefully crafted plan unraveling before his eyes. He knew what this meant. No money. No easy escape. No fresh start with his new little distraction. Just the consequences of his own arrogance. I pulled out my phone, tapping the screen a few times before holding it up. "Oh, and one last thing." I turned the screen toward him, displaying an email from my lawyer. "Your access to our joint accounts? Revoked. Your name on any financial assets? Removed. That Miami getaway you were so looking forward to?" I let the question hang for a moment, savoring his reaction. "Cancelled." Ryan's face drained of color. His lips parted slightly as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. He was still processing the fact that he had not just lost the upper hand, he had never even had it to begin with. And I wasn't done yet. Ryan's breathing had turned shallow, his once self-assured demeanor now unraveling with every passing second. His grip on the papers tightened as if he could somehow will them out of existence. I could see it, the moment realization truly hit him. He hadn't blindsided me. I had blindsided him. Still, the man was stubborn. He straightened his shoulders, attempting to salvage what little pride he had left. "Olivia, let's be reasonable," he said, voice forced into a low, placating tone. "We can still work something out. I never meant for things to get ugly." I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. "Oh, Ryan. Things have been ugly for a long time. You just didn't notice because you were too busy lying to yourself." I reached for my clutch, pulling out another document, one I had been waiting for the perfect moment to reveal. With deliberate slowness, I unfolded it and placed it on top of the divorce papers in front of him. "Here. Since you're so eager to settle things tonight, you might as well see this too." Ryan hesitated before picking it up, scanning the contents. And then, the final blow landed. His eyes widened. His hands trembled. His entire body stiffened like he had just been punched in the gut. It was a court motion, a legal filing from my lawyer requesting an emergency freeze on all shared assets due to financial misconduct. Attached were records of his unauthorized transactions, evidence that he had siphoned money from our accounts under false pretenses. With my lawyer's precision, everything had been documented down to the last cent. The airline tickets. The hotel stays. The expensive gifts. Even the wire transfer to Emma's so-called business account, which, unsurprisingly, led back to nothing more than a Venmo ID. Ryan's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. His fingers skimmed over the last paragraph, where it was made clear, if he didn't return the funds, he would face formal legal action. The blood drained from his face. His lips parted slightly as if he wanted to protest, to argue, to beg, but there was nothing left to say. I exhaled, feigning sympathy. "Oh, and before you even think about trying to access our accounts again, don't bother." I gestured toward my phone. "The emergency freeze is already in effect. That means your personal accounts are next, Ryan." I imagine that'll be a problem since, well, I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice just enough so only he could hear. "I know your credit cards are maxed out." He flinched. I saw the way his throat tightened, how his hands twitched slightly at his sides. He knew I was right. Ryan had been living beyond his means for months, spending recklessly on a lifestyle he couldn't afford without me. And now? He had nothing. The tension in the room was suffocating. Guests were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, whispering amongst themselves. A few of them had discreetly put away their phones, sensing that they were no longer watching a spectacle but a complete and utter destruction. Then, just when I thought Ryan couldn't look more humiliated, his phone buzzed on the table. A message. The screen lit up. And from where I was sitting, I caught the first few words of the preview. Emma, hey babe, what's going on? The hotel says our reservation was cancelled. A deep, unbearable silence settled between us. Ryan's jaw tightened. His entire body tensed. For the first time, his mask of composure completely shattered. I simply smiled, leaning back into my chair, sipping the last of my wine. Looks like you've got some explaining to do. Ryan's fingers twitched as he reached for his phone, flipping it over so the screen faced down, as if that could somehow erase what had just happened. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, but there was none. The guests were still watching, still murmuring, their hushed voices carrying through the air like static. Some looked uncomfortable, others fascinated. A few, I was sure, were reveling in the drama unfolding before them. He swallowed hard, shifting in his seat. Olivia, he started, his voice strained, this is a mistake. We don't have to do this here. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. Oh? But wasn't that your plan? To do this here, in front of everyone? To embarrass me? I folded my hands neatly in my lap. You wanted a spectacle, Ryan. You got one. Just, not quite the way you imagined, I'm guessing. His nostrils flared. You're making a scene, he hissed, voice dropping so only I could hear. I let out a soft, amused sigh. No, Ryan. You made a scene when you thought you were the one in control. I could see the frustration building beneath his carefully crafted exterior, the way his jaw clenched, the tension in his shoulders. He wasn't used to this, to losing. To being exposed in front of an audience. The restaurant staff, sensing the shift in atmosphere, had subtly stepped back, leaving us alone in our little war zone. No one wanted to interfere. Not when things had become this deliciously messy. Then, his phone buzzed again. A second message. Another reminder that his perfect little plan was crumbling right before his eyes. He didn't reach for it this time. Instead, he exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair before fixing me with a look that was meant to be stern, but there was fear behind it now. He was scrambling. Desperate. Trying to salvage what little dignity he had left. Olivia, let's be rational, he said, forcing his voice into something resembling calm. I don't want this to turn ugly. I let out a soft chuckle, shaking my head. Oh, Ryan. It's already ugly. The difference is, I just don't lose sleep over it. His hands curled into fists against the table. I could practically see the gears turning in his head, searching for a way to regain control. But there was none. Because I had planned for everything. And then, just as I was about to deliver the final blow, his mother's name flashed across my phone screen. I smirked, holding up the phone just enough for Ryan to see. His face paled. He knew exactly why she was calling. She must have heard, I mused, pretending to contemplate whether or not I should answer. Word travels fast, doesn't it? I glanced up at him. I wonder what she'll think when she finds out what you've been up to. Ryan stiffened. Don't bring my family into this. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, but it's okay when you tell them I was the problem? That I was controlling? Cold? Unloving? I let the words sink in, watching as his expression darkened. You've already fed them your version of the story, Ryan. Let's see how they feel after hearing mine. The phone buzzed again. I let it go to voicemail. I had no interest in talking to his mother. Not now. Not ever again. Ryan's breathing was heavier now, his face flushed with frustration, embarrassment, and something else, realization. He had lost. There was no fixing this, no twisting the narrative, no crawling his way out of the hole he had dug for himself. He had spent months crafting his escape plan, carefully setting the stage for his fresh start. But in his arrogance, he had overlooked the one thing that mattered most. I was already 10 steps ahead. And I wasn't done watching him crumble. Ryan's hands curled into fists on the table, his once confident posture now rigid with frustration. He was unraveling, and I could feel the heat of his humiliation radiating off him. His mind was scrambling for a way out, for any sliver of control he could cling to, but there was nothing left to hold on to. The weight of silence pressed down on him. I could see it, the realization settling in that this wasn't just a temporary setback. This was the end. Not the clean break he had envisioned, where he walked away unscathed with half of my assets and a young, naive woman clinging to his arm. No, this was his downfall, unfolding in real time. Ryan's mother had stopped calling, but now his sister, Amanda, was texting me. Amanda, Olivia, is this true? I glanced up at Ryan, my lips curling into a small smile as I tilted my phone just enough for him to see the message. His jaw tightened. He knew exactly what it meant. The moment his family got involved, the entire facade he had built, the lies he had spun to justify his actions, would start to collapse. You told them I was the villain, I murmured, slipping my phone back into my clutch. That I was cold. Controlling. Unloving. I tapped my fingers idly against the table. I wonder how they'll feel after seeing the evidence. Ryan sucked in a sharp breath through his nose. He was barely keeping it together now, but he was still trying, desperately clinging to the last shreds of his pride. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife a little deeper, the restaurant manager approached our table. Mr. Carter? The man's voice was professional, but there was something else behind it, a quiet satisfaction. I apologize for the interruption, but it seems your credit card has been declined. I bit back a laugh. Perfect timing. Ryan's entire body tensed. He blinked, caught completely off guard. What? The manager remained calm, his hands folded neatly in front of him. Your card was used to secure tonight's reservation, but when we attempted to process the payment, it was declined. He paused. Would you like to provide another form of payment? The restaurant had been reserved under Ryan's name. He had planned this as his moment. His triumph. He had probably envisioned me sitting here, humiliated and blindsided, while he basked in the glow of his new freedom. And yet, here we were, the entire night backfiring in the most spectacular way. I leaned forward slightly, resting my chin on my hand. Oh, Ryan, I said sweetly. Did you forget? I removed you as an authorized user on our accounts. His lips parted slightly, as if the words had physically knocked the wind out of him. The manager, sensing the tension, cleared his throat. Mrs. Carter, would you like us to transfer the bill to you? I smiled, standing up and grabbing my clutch. Oh no, that won't be necessary. I turned to Ryan. I'm sure my soon-to-be ex-husband can figure it out. Ryan shot me a glare, but it lacked its usual fire. He was a man defeated. A man who had played the game and lost spectacularly. I stepped away from the table, feeling the weight of every eye in the restaurant on me. The whispers were louder now, the murmurs of a story that would spread like wildfire. And as I walked toward the exit, I allowed myself one final glance back. Ryan was still sitting there, his hands gripping the divorce papers and financial records I had handed him, his face pale, his breathing uneven. His perfect plan lay in ruins before him. And I had never felt lighter. The cold night air hit my skin as I stepped outside the restaurant, but the satisfaction burning in my chest kept me warm. I could still hear the hushed murmurs from inside, feel the weight of dozens of eyes watching me walk away, not as a broken woman, not as a victim, but as someone who had just won a war before her opponent even realized the battle had begun. I took my time slipping into the waiting town car, crossing my legs as I pulled out my phone. I had one last loose end to tie up. Ryan had spent months weaving his lies, convincing his family, his friends, even himself that I was the problem. That I was distant, controlling, too caught up in my career to appreciate him. And I had let him, because why argue when I knew the truth would reveal itself in the end? Now, the truth was out, and the people he had manipulated were beginning to see him for what he truly was. My notifications were lighting up, calls from mutual friends, text messages from his sister, but the one that truly made me smirk was from Emma. Emma, Ryan isn't answering me. What's going on? I stared at the message for a long moment, debating whether or not I should respond. A part of me almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the hotel reservations, the expensive dinners, the smug little smile she gave me the one time we met at his gym, before she realized I knew exactly who she was. So instead of a reply, I did something better. I took a screenshot of Ryan's financial records, the ones proving he had drained his accounts dry for her, and sent it to her without a single word. The moment the message showed as read, my phone buzzed violently with an incoming call from her. I let it ring. Then another. And another. I let them all go to voicemail, a small smile tugging at my lips. Let her panic. Let her realize that Ryan Carter was not the Prince Charming she thought he was, but a desperate, broke, washed-up man who had just lost everything. The car pulled into my driveway, the soft glow of my home's exterior lights greeting me. My house, the one Ryan had repeatedly asked me to put his name on, as if I were that naive. The one I had inherited from my grandmother, kept in my name only, despite his subtle, persistent suggestions over the years. Another thing he had failed to steal from me. Stepping inside, I inhaled deeply, feeling an unfamiliar sensation settle over me. Peace. Not relief, because I had never been afraid of losing him. Not sadness, because I had mourned the loss of our marriage long before tonight. Just peace. I poured myself a glass of wine, the expensive kind Ryan always insisted was a waste of money. A special occasion bottle. And if this didn't qualify as a celebration, I didn't know what did. As I settled onto the couch, my phone buzzed one last time. Ryan, you think you're so smart, but you're going to regret this. Half of your business is mine, and I'll make sure you pay for what you did tonight. I sighed, taking another sip of wine before forwarding the message to my lawyer. Let him dig his grave deeper. He had already lost everything, but if he wanted to drag himself further into legal ruin, I wasn't going to stop him. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply being prepared. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages. Some from mutual friends, some from people who had been at the restaurant last night, and, of course, several from Ryan. I ignored all of them, except for one, a text from my lawyer. Natalie, attorney, emergency hearing scheduled for Monday. Given his admission of financial misconduct in writing, we have a strong case to freeze any remaining joint assets. Expect him to fight back, but don't worry, I have everything covered. I smirked, stretching lazily as I set my phone down. Ryan thought he could play dirty, but he had no idea how airtight my preparations were. By noon, the first wave of Ryan's desperation hit. Ryan, you think you're so clever, Olivia, but you won't get away with this. Half of your business is mine. I have records of everything. I rolled my eyes. He was grasping at straws now. My business, the one he had dismissed for years as my little side project, was structured so securely that not even a team of corporate sharks could argue for his ownership. But he didn't stop there. 2 hours later, my assistant knocked on my office door, holding her phone out hesitantly. Ryan's sister is on the line, she said, brows raised. She says it's urgent. I exhaled, considering for a moment before nodding. Put her through. Amanda's voice crackled over the speaker. Olivia, she sighed. I don't even know what to say. Ryan called our mom this morning, freaking out. He's claiming you stole everything from him. But then we saw the texts. The credit card charges. The Miami hotel reservation. Her voice grew tight. He's blaming you, but we know better now. I didn't reply immediately. This was exactly what Ryan had feared. He had spent months feeding them lies, convincing them that I was the problem, the cold and distant wife who drove him into the arms of someone else. And now? The truth had unraveled before them. He's running out of options, I finally said, leaning back in my chair. And he knows it. Amanda hesitated before speaking again. Look. I know we weren't fair to you at first. I believed what he told us. But now, seeing how he treated you, how he tried to take everything, she sighed heavily. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You didn't deserve this. I didn't need their apologies. But it was nice to hear. Before I could respond, my assistant peeked her head in again. You might want to check your email, she said, eyes widening slightly. It's from Natalie. I pulled up my inbox and scanned the message. Then I laughed. Ryan had officially petitioned the court to revisit the financial division in our divorce. He was trying to claim partial ownership of my business. And the judge dismissed his request immediately. As per the ruling, Ryan was ordered to pay back every cent he had siphoned from our joint account. Money that, of course, he no longer had. He had spent it all on Emma. I smirked, replying to Amanda before ending the call. Tell your brother good luck figuring that out. Because I was done playing games. Monday morning arrived with crisp winter air and the distant hum of New York traffic. I stepped out of my car, smoothing my tailored coat as I approached the courthouse. The emergency hearing was set, and I was more than ready. Inside, I spotted Ryan immediately. He was standing near the entrance, shifting uncomfortably in his ill-fitted blazer. The designer wardrobe he had once flaunted was gone, most likely returned in a desperate attempt to recover some cash. His lawyer, a man who looked as if he had been hired at the last possible second, was speaking to him in hushed tones. Ryan's eyes snapped to me as I walked in, his expression darkening. Good. Let him stew. I took my seat beside my lawyer, Natalie, who greeted me with her usual poised confidence. This should be quick, she murmured, sliding a neatly compiled folder of documents toward me. He's attempting to claim a share of your business, but we've got clear-cut proof that he had no financial stake in it. I nodded, flipping through the pages. And the stolen funds? Already addressed in the filing, she replied smoothly. The judge won't be pleased. As if on cue, the courtroom doors opened, and we were called forward. The hearing was as predictable as I had anticipated. Ryan's lawyer tried to paint the narrative that my business had grown during our marriage, therefore entitling Ryan to a portion of it. Natalie shut that down in seconds. Your Honor, she said, her voice steady, we have clear financial records showing that Dr. Carter's business was established before the marriage and that she has maintained strict separation of business and personal finances throughout. The judge barely looked impressed by Ryan's argument. He glanced down at the records, flipping a page before turning his gaze to Ryan. Mr. Carter, his voice was firm, unimpressed, you admitted via text message to deliberately emptying a joint account and using shared credit cards to fund personal travel. Do you deny this? Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I was just trying to make a clean break, the judge cut in, raising a brow. By committing financial misconduct? Silence. I watched as Ryan squirmed, his arrogance rapidly dissolving. The judge exhaled, closing the file before him. The court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct, he declared. All shared assets are frozen pending the final dissolution. Additionally, Mr. Carter is ordered to return any funds removed from joint accounts within 24 hours. Ryan's head jerked up. That money's gone, he blurted. I spent it on. He cut himself off too late. The judge didn't even look up as he gathered his papers. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it. Ryan sat back, stunned. He had played this all wrong. He had expected me to beg, to crumble under the weight of his betrayal. Instead, he had destroyed himself. I rose from my seat, smoothing my coat. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of Emma, standing outside the courthouse. She looked different. The bright, eager girl I had seen months ago at his gym was gone. In her place was someone who had learned a hard lesson. As I passed her, she hesitated before speaking. I owe you an apology, she murmured, voice quieter than I had ever heard it. I believed everything he told me. That you were cold. Controlling. She exhaled, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Then I watched him try the same manipulation on me. I studied her for a moment, then simply said, he wasn't looking for love, Emma. He was looking for a way to escape responsibility. She nodded, biting her lip. Yeah. I see that now. And then, just like Ryan, she was left standing alone. I stepped outside, the cold air filling my lungs as the weight of this chapter finally lifted. Ryan had lost. And I had never been stronger. A month after the hearing, Ryan's downfall was no longer whispered gossip, it was public knowledge. News of the court ruling had spread through our social circles like wildfire. He had lost everything, his financial stability, his reputation, his relationship. And the best part? He had done it all to himself. He tried applying for jobs, but the university quietly let him go after the scandal became too big to ignore. His colleagues distanced themselves. His family, the same people who once believed his lies about me, stopped taking his calls. Even Emma was gone. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that she had moved on to a coworker her own age, leaving Ryan to fend for himself. He was now crashing on his mother's couch, drowning in legal debt, and struggling to figure out what had gone so horribly wrong. Meanwhile, I was flourishing. My business had never been better. The boutique clinics I had built from the ground up were expanding, and my latest opening had been covered in a major business magazine, not as Ryan Carter's ex-wife, but as a powerhouse entrepreneur who had protected her empire. One evening, as I was preparing to leave my office, my assistant knocked hesitantly on my door. "There's a letter," she said, setting a sealed envelope on my desk. "From him. Ryan." I stared at it for a long moment before finally opening it. The letter was short. Pitiful. A desperate attempt to rewrite the past. "Olivia, I never meant for things to end like this. I made mistakes, but I never stopped caring about you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I exhaled, setting the paper aside. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I turned to my office wall, where a single framed screenshot hung. Ryan's last arrogant text before his world collapsed. "Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age." Below it, in sharp contrast, sat my latest business award. Proof that sometimes, revenge isn't loud. It isn't cruel. It isn't even intentional. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply winning. Ethan placed the coffee cup in front of me, his fingers lingering on the rim for just a second too long. Steam curled upward, carrying a scent that made my stomach tighten, bitter, almost metallic. Something was off. "I made this just for you, Evelyn. Go on, taste it." His voice was smooth, almost too smooth, carefully measured like a rehearsed performance. I looked up, meeting the eyes of the man I had been married to for 3 years. His smile was warm, affectionate even. But that was the problem. It was too perfect. Too deliberate. Across the table, Victoria, my sister-in-law, stirred her coffee with lazy indifference. She looked effortlessly elegant, as always, in a tailored silk blouse, her dark hair swept into an immaculate bun. But it was her eyes that unsettled me. Amusement flickered behind them, like she was in on some private joke I wasn't supposed to understand. "Ethan's been practicing different brewing methods lately," she mused, lifting her cup to her lips but not drinking. "Just for you." There it was. The emphasis. For you. A statement wrapped in honey, hiding something far more dangerous beneath. I glanced down at my cup again, the scent creeping into my lungs. It wasn't just coffee. There was something else. Something foreign. The last time I had a drink at Victoria's house, I ended up in urgent care for the night. A mysterious allergic reaction, they called it. The same way they had called the other incidents food poisoning, a bad stomach virus, an unfortunate coincidence. Except coincidences didn't happen this often. I forced a smile, lifting the cup just enough to bring it near my lips. Ethan and Victoria both watched me. Waiting. I didn't take a sip. Instead, I turned my wrist slightly, pretending to examine the coffee as I studied them through the rising steam. Ethan looked calm. Too calm. His hands were resting on the table, but his right thumb was tapping rhythmically against the wood, nervous energy betraying the mask he wore. Victoria, on the other hand, was unreadable. Poised, detached, but her fingers remained curled around her untouched cup. Something was wrong. And I wasn't about to be their fool. I let the cup hover near my lips, tilting it just enough to give the illusion that I was about to take a sip. The bitter scent lingered, filling my nostrils, making my stomach twist tighter. They were waiting for me to drink. I lowered the cup with a thoughtful hum. It smells different. Ethan's smile twitched. It's a new blend. Something special. Special. I fought the urge to laugh. Special, indeed. You always get creative with your coffee, don't you? I mused, swirling the liquid slightly, watching the dark ripples dance along the ceramic edges. Victoria smirked, leaning back in her chair. He really does. It's admirable how much effort he puts in, especially for you. There it was again. For you. Like a quiet warning dressed as a compliment. I glanced toward the window, my reflection barely visible against the city skyline beyond. The afternoon sunlight glowed against the pristine white marble countertops, the glass dining table perfectly set, everything in Victoria's penthouse was pristine, controlled, just like her. My fingers tightened slightly around the handle of the cup. This wasn't paranoia. This was survival. For the past year, my life had been littered with accidents. Small things, easy to dismiss. A slightly spoiled dish that only made me sick. A drink that tasted off, followed by an unexplained fever. A stomach bug that no one else in the house caught. Each time, Ethan had been there with a soft apology, a warm hand on my back, a reminder that I should be more careful. Then, 2 months ago, I had collapsed after drinking tea at Victoria's house. I spent hours in urgent care, my body racked with tremors and nausea. The doctors never found anything conclusive, but I knew. I knew. I also knew that Victoria had made that tea herself. And she had sat there, across from me, watching with that same amused smirk she wore now. The pieces had been falling into place for months. The hushed conversations that stopped when I entered the room. The lingering glances between Ethan and Victoria. The way his phone lit up with messages at odd hours, messages I wasn't supposed to see. This wasn't just about me. They had been planning something. Together. And today, they had placed it right in front of me. I exhaled softly, setting the cup down with deliberate care. My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept my movements smooth, unbothered. If they were watching me, I would watch them too. Then, an idea formed. A test. A simple switch. I reached for my phone, pretending to check a notification. Oh, 1 second. I need to take a quick call for work. I stood up, moving away from the table, stepping around Victoria's seat. As I passed by her, I stumbled, just slightly, knocking the table, making a small commotion. Oh. Sorry about that. I gasped, steadying myself. Victoria's cup wobbled. My hand moved fast, too fast for her to notice. When I straightened up, my coffee was no longer in front of me. It was in front of Victoria. Victoria barely reacted, too absorbed in whatever game she thought she was winning. She adjusted the napkin on her lap, lifting her cup with the same casual elegance she always carried. I forced myself to breathe evenly, to keep my expression neutral as she brought the rim to her lips. Ethan was still watching me, expecting me to return to my seat and drink. But I didn't. I lingered near the window, phone in hand, pretending to scroll while keeping my focus razor-sharp on Victoria. The first sip was small. Barely a taste. She let the coffee sit on her tongue for a moment before swallowing. Then, something changed. It was subtle at first, a flicker of hesitation, her fingers tightening around the porcelain, the barest shift in her expression. My pulse quickened. She set the cup down slowly, blinking twice. A pause. Too long of a pause. Ethan noticed. Something wrong? He tried to keep his tone light, but I heard it, the undercurrent of panic, the realization creeping in. Victoria exhaled sharply, shaking her head as if clearing a fog. No, it's a little strong, that's all. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a thin crack in the polished surface. I turned back toward the table, tilting my head. Oh? You usually like your coffee bold. I moved closer, watching as she lifted the cup again. This time, her hand wasn't as steady. Another sip. Then, a sharp inhale. She pressed a palm against her stomach, her jaw tightening. Ethan sat up straighter. Victoria? His voice dropped, no longer casual. She tried to speak, but a strange sound came out instead, something between a cough and a gasp. Her breath hitched. A tremor ran through her hand as she set the cup down with too much force, some of the liquid sloshing over the side. My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm, unreadable. I wanted her to say it. I needed her to admit it. Something feels off, she muttered, blinking rapidly. She reached for her napkin, dabbing at her lips, but I saw the tremble in her fingers now, the tension in her shoulders. Ethan's chair scraped against the floor as he shot up. Victoria, what's going on? He glanced at me, then at her cup. I watched the exact moment the realization hit him, when he put it all together. Panic settled into his features. His gaze snapped back to me, searching for confirmation, for any sign that I had figured it out. I held his stare, letting the silence stretch between us before speaking. That wasn't my cup, I said softly. His face drained of color. Victoria let out a sharp breath, gripping the edge of the table. Ethan. Her voice was barely above a whisper now, strained, uncertain, but laced with something new, fear. Ethan turned back to her, eyes wide, hands twitching at his sides. That wasn't supposed to be yours, he muttered, almost to himself. But the words hung in the air like a death sentence. The room went still. The only sound was Victoria's unsteady breathing, the faint clink of her spoon against the saucer as her trembling hand knocked against it. The perfect illusion they had crafted was shattering right in front of them. My pulse steadied, my grip tightening around my phone. I had what I needed. Now, it was time to finish this. Ethan lunged toward Victoria, his movements frantic as he crouched beside her chair. Just breathe, okay? You're fine. But she wasn't fine. Her pupils had dilated, her skin was paling by the second, and a thin sheen of sweat formed along her brow. Her fingers dug into the tablecloth, gripping it like an anchor. What did you put in it? Her voice was hoarse, each word a struggle. I stayed where I was, watching it all unfold. Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. He was too busy calculating his next move, too busy realizing that his plan had collapsed right in front of him. I pulled my phone from my pocket and pressed the record button. You should tell her, Ethan, I said, my voice almost gentle. Tell her what was in my cup. The one she just drank. His head snapped up, eyes wild. Evelyn, this isn't what you think. No? I stepped forward, resting my hand on the back of an empty chair. Then explain it to me. Explain why Victoria is having the same symptoms I had 2 months ago, after drinking tea at her house. Or why I ended up in urgent care 3 times this year after sharing meals with you too. My voice hardened. Explain that. Victoria coughed, a choked sound escaping her throat. She clutched her stomach, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She wasn't trying to mask her fear anymore. Her body was betraying her, just as she had planned for mine to. I watched as the truth settled in, the horror, the betrayal. Her gaze shifted to Ethan, her lips parting. "You," she whispered, something breaking in her expression. "You told me it wouldn't." He clamped a hand over hers, gripping it tightly. "Stop talking," he hissed under his breath. "We just need to." I dialed 911. Ethan's head snapped toward me as the call connected. 911, what's your emergency? My sister-in-law appears to be having a severe reaction to something in her coffee, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos unraveling before me. She's conscious, but experiencing tremors and difficulty breathing. We're at 1542 West Monroe, Penthouse 3. Victoria's breathing hitched. Ethan's grip on her tightened, his knuckles turning white. His mind was working, I could see it. He was trying to find an escape route, a way to twist this in his favor. But there wasn't one. Not anymore. Victoria groaned, her body slumping slightly. "Ethan," she rasped. "Tell me, what was in it?" Ethan swallowed hard. His silence was damning. I lifted my phone higher, ensuring the screen was facing him. "I'm still recording," I reminded him. "So go ahead, explain." His mouth opened, but no words came out. He knew there was nothing to say. Nothing that could undo this. The sirens blared in the distance, growing closer. Help was on the way, but not for him. Not for them. Ethan's world, the careful, calculated life he had built, was crumbling. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to relief. The sirens grew louder, the sharp wail slicing through the suffocating tension in the room. Ethan's face was pale now, beads of sweat forming along his hairline. His grip on Victoria slackened just as her body trembled again, her breathing turning more erratic. She tried to lift a hand toward him, as if seeking reassurance, but he didn't reach back. He was too busy unraveling. I stepped closer, keeping my phone steady. "Tell me, Ethan," I said, my voice calm, deliberate. "How were you planning to explain this? If I had been the one to drink that coffee instead of her, what was your plan?" He turned to me then, something shifting behind his eyes, something darker. For a split second, I saw it. The calculation. The survival instinct kicking in. But before he could piece together whatever lie he was scrambling for, Victoria let out a sharp, pained gasp. "You said it would just make her sick," she choked out, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hand gripped Ethan's sleeve weakly. "You said it wouldn't be traced." My breath caught. There it was. The confession I had been waiting for. Ethan flinched, his head whipping toward her. "Victoria, stop talking," he snapped, his voice low but edged with panic. She ignored him, her glazed eyes locking onto mine instead. "The tea," she muttered, her words slurred. "The breakfast, the last time." It was all him. I felt my stomach drop. I had suspected Victoria had been in on it from the start. But now, as I watched the realization dawn in her eyes, I saw something else. She had been manipulated too. I gripped my phone tighter. "And what about this time?" I asked softly. "Was it him again?" Her lips parted, but she never got the chance to answer. The front door burst open. 2 paramedics rushed in, followed closely by a pair of uniformed officers. One of them, a tall woman with sharp eyes, scanned the room quickly before focusing on Victoria's slumped form. "We need space," one of the paramedics instructed, already kneeling beside her. I stepped back, keeping my phone recording. Ethan, however, didn't move. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his eyes darting toward the officers like a cornered animal. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a clipped tone, turned to me. "You were the caller?" I nodded. "I have everything recorded." She drank from my cup. The coffee, there was something in it. He switched them before I could drink. I jerked my chin toward Ethan. And she just admitted that he's been drugging me for months. The officer's jaw tightened. His gaze flickered toward Ethan. Sir, I need you to step away. Ethan moved. Fast. I barely had time to react before he lunged toward me, his hand reaching for my phone. But the officers were faster. One grabbed him by the arm, yanking him backward as he struggled. Evelyn, he shouted, his voice wild now, desperate. You don't understand. She was the one who. He didn't get to finish. The officer forced him down, pinning his arms behind his back as the cuffs clicked into place. Victoria let out a weak laugh, her lips curling into something bitter. Look at you, she rasped. You really thought you'd get away with it. Ethan thrashed once more, his breath coming in ragged gasps. But he wasn't looking at Victoria anymore. He was looking at me. And for the first time since this all started, I saw something real in his eyes. Fear. Ethan's struggles grew weaker as the officer secured the cuffs around his wrists. The panic in his eyes was raw now, stripped of the calculated charm he had worn for years. He wasn't in control anymore. He knew it. I knew it. Victoria let out a ragged breath, her body barely holding itself upright as the paramedics worked around her. She was still conscious, but barely. Her fingers twitched slightly on the table, her skin pale and clammy. Despite the fear in her expression, there was something else flickering beneath it, realization. She had never thought she would be the one gasping for breath. I shifted my attention to Ethan. His chest was rising and falling rapidly, his lips slightly parted as if he was still trying to come up with a way out of this. You really thought I wouldn't notice, didn't you? I said quietly, stepping closer. All those times you made excuses. All those nights I was curled up in pain, and you convinced me it was just bad luck. I shook my head, my grip tightening around my phone. You almost had me believing it. His nostrils flared. Evelyn, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I held up the phone, the red recording light still blinking. Victoria might not have realized what you were capable of until it was too late, but I did. I've known for a while. The female officer who had been standing to the side stepped forward then, her expression unreadable. Ma'am, would you be willing to provide a formal statement? I exhaled slowly, nodding. Yes. Ethan jerked in the officer's grip. She's lying. She set this up. His voice cracked with desperation. Victoria, tell them. Victoria didn't respond. She was too busy clenching her jaw against another wave of nausea, her body too weak to even glare at him. The paramedics exchanged glances before one of them addressed the officers. She needs to be transported now. Whatever she ingested, it's spreading fast. Ethan's expression twisted. You can fix this, he urged her. Tell them I had nothing to do with it. Tell them it was her. Victoria finally turned her head, her heavy-lidded eyes landing on him. For the first time since she had started feeling the effects of the poisoned coffee, she actually looked at him, really looked at him. And then she laughed. It was weak, barely more than an exhale, but it was filled with something bitter. Fix this, she murmured, her voice hoarse. You're the one who promised it wouldn't be traced, Ethan. She blinked sluggishly. You're the one who said, it was just supposed to make her sick. Silence. The officers exchanged glances, their grips on Ethan tightening. There it was. The final nail in his coffin. Victoria's breathing was unsteady, but her lips curled just slightly as she muttered, You poisoned me. Ethan's face drained of color completely. Victoria, he whispered, but there was nothing left to say. She let her head tilt back slightly against the chair, her body giving in to exhaustion. The paramedics loaded her onto the stretcher, her eyes fluttering closed. She didn't look at him again. I stepped back, watching as they wheeled her toward the door. The entire room felt smaller, suffocating, but I refused to let the weight of it crush me. One of the officers tapped his radio. We'll need a forensic team to test the coffee and collect evidence at the scene. He looked at me then. We'll also need to take your phone as evidence. The recording. I already sent a copy to my lawyer. My voice was steady, firm. Ethan flinched. The officer nodded approvingly. Smart. Ethan let out a strangled sound. You're ruining everything. I tilted my head, watching him. No, Ethan. You did that all on your own. The officers led him toward the door. He thrashed once more, but it was weaker now, useless. He turned his head at the last second, eyes burning with something ugly. You think this is over? He hissed. I stared at him, unblinking. Oh, it is, I said. And then they took him away. The moment the door shut behind them, the silence in the penthouse was deafening. I stood there, inhaling slowly, letting the weight of everything settle. It was over. The months of paranoia, the nights spent wondering if I was imagining things, the careful calculations to uncover the truth, it was all over. I glanced down at the untouched coffee cup still sitting in front of me, its surface now cool, harmless. It could have been me. It was supposed to be me. I exhaled, dragging my fingers through my hair before making my way toward the window. The city stretched before me, golden light spilling between the skyscrapers. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. A soft chime pulled me back to the moment. My phone. I glanced at the screen, a message from my lawyer. The files are secure. We'll proceed with formal charges. I assume you're pressing them against both? I hesitated, just for a second. Victoria had been a willing participant in everything leading up to today. She had manipulated, schemed, played her part in every attempt to destroy me. But in the end, she had been just as disposable to Ethan as I was. I typed my response. Yes. Both. There was no hesitation this time. I turned away from the window, stepping over to the table. My fingers traced the edge of Victoria's abandoned coffee cup before I carefully lifted it and placed it in the sink. I wasn't about to leave behind any evidence that could be twisted into something against me. Not that I needed to worry, the truth was already out. A knock at the door startled me slightly. When I opened it, a uniformed officer was standing there, his expression professional but firm. Miss Carter, we'll need you to come down to the station for an official statement. This won't take long, but given the severity of the case, the detectives will want to speak with you personally. I nodded. Of course. Let me grab my coat. As I slipped on my jacket, my gaze flickered once more to the table, to the 2 coffee cups, one empty, one nearly full. The evidence of their downfall. I stepped outside, locking the penthouse behind me. There was still more to be done. Statements to give. Trials to attend. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one being hunted. I was walking away. And I was winning. The ride to the station was quiet. The officer driving didn't speak much, which suited me just fine. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. My mind was already working through what came next, the formal statement, the legal proceedings, the inevitable media storm that would follow once the truth got out. Ethan and Victoria weren't just going to prison. They were about to lose everything. When we arrived, I was escorted into a private room where a detective was already waiting. Detective Mendoza, according to her badge. She was sharp-eyed, mid-40s, and had the air of someone who had seen far too many cases like this. She gestured for me to sit. Miss Carter, I appreciate you coming in so quickly, she said, flipping open a file. Let's start with what you know. I leaned back slightly, meeting her gaze head-on. I know that my husband has been poisoning me for months. I know that my sister-in-law helped him. And I know that today, they plan to do it again, only this time, they made a mistake. Mendoza's brows lifted slightly. A mistake? I folded my hands in my lap. Victoria drank the wrong cup. She let out a low whistle, jotting something down. And you have proof of this? I pulled out my phone, placing it on the table. Recorded conversation. Video. Messages I forwarded to my lawyer. Medical records from past incidents. Mendoza looked impressed but not surprised. Smart, she murmured. Most people in situations like this don't think that far ahead. I let out a dry laugh. Most people don't expect their own husband to try and kill them. She nodded, flipping through the notes in front of her. Forensics is already analyzing the coffee. If the toxicology report matches what we suspect, your husband will be facing attempted murder charges. Your sister-in-law as well, depending on her level of involvement. She was involved, I said firmly. But Ethan was the mastermind. Mendoza leaned forward slightly. Why do you think he did it? I exhaled. Money. Power. Control. My jaw tightened. Ethan always hated that I was the more successful one. My company was thriving, and his career had stalled. Victoria wanted me out of the way because we worked in the same industry, competing for the same clients. Together, they figured out a solution that worked for both of them. Mendoza clicked her pen, nodding slowly. But they got greedy. And sloppy. They underestimated me, I corrected. She studied me for a long moment, then closed the file. I'll be honest, Miss Carter. Most people in your position wouldn't have made it this far. They would have ignored the signs, given in to fear, or ended up exactly where Ethan wanted them to. I held her gaze, my voice steady. I don't scare easily. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Good. That's going to serve you well in the trial. She stood, extending a hand. We'll be in touch once the official charges are filed. In the meantime, if you need anything, security, legal support, let us know. Given the nature of this case, you're going to be under a lot of scrutiny. I shook her hand. I can handle it. And I meant it. As I walked out of the station, stepping into the crisp evening air, I knew one thing for certain: Ethan and Victoria had played their game well. But I had played it better. And now, I was the one walking free. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back, their cameras flashing as Ethan and Victoria were let in, both wearing the same prison-issued jumpsuits. It was a stark contrast to the polished, powerful image they had once cultivated. Ethan looked thinner, his jaw clenched as he avoided my gaze. Victoria, on the other hand, was barely holding herself together. I sat in the front row, my lawyer beside me, hands folded neatly in my lap. I wasn't here to gloat. I was here to watch them fall. The prosecution wasted no time laying out the evidence. Your Honor, what we have here is a premeditated and calculated attempt at poisoning Mrs. Carter, spanning months. The prosecutor clicked through slides on the overhead screen. Medical records indicate she was hospitalized 3 separate times under suspicious circumstances, each time after consuming food or drink prepared by the defendants. I watched as security footage from Victoria's penthouse played on the screen. The moment I swapped the cups, Victoria unknowingly drinking what was meant for me. Ethan tensed in his seat, his hands curling into fists. Then, the prosecutor played the audio recording from that day. You said it would just make her sick. You said it wouldn't be traced. Victoria's voice, clear as day, rang through the silent courtroom. The jury was watching her now, their expressions unreadable. But she felt it. She knew what they were thinking. Her head snapped toward Ethan. For the first time, real hatred burned in her gaze. You son of a, she hissed under her breath, but her lawyer grabbed her arm, whispering something urgent. She exhaled sharply, shifting in her seat. That's when it happened. Victoria flipped. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, I have something to say. Her lawyer paled. Ethan stiffened. I was manipulated, she continued, her voice quivering just enough to sound believable. Ethan told me that it was harmless, that it would just make Evelyn too sick to attend an important work meeting. She blinked, her face twisted with rehearsed regret. I never would have agreed if I knew it was poison. I almost laughed. She was trying to save herself. The prosecutor didn't look surprised. Miss Carter, you knowingly participated in a scheme that resulted in multiple hospitalizations and nearly caused the death of your own sister-in-law. Whether you were misled or not, you played a role in this crime. Victoria opened her mouth, as if to protest, but the judge cut her off. Enough. We've heard the evidence. Ethan shot her a murderous glare. His betrayal was evident. He had expected her to go down with him, to remain silent. But she wasn't willing to sacrifice herself for him. Not anymore. The judge turned to the jury. Have you reached a verdict? A woman in the front row, the jury foreperson, stood. Yes, Your Honor. The room held its breath. For the defendant, Ethan Carter, we find him guilty on all counts. Ethan closed his eyes, his jaw locked in fury. For the defendant, Victoria Sinclair, we find her guilty of conspiracy and attempted poisoning. Victoria let out a shuddering breath, slumping slightly in her seat. She had hoped for leniency. She didn't get it. The judge's voice rang clear. Ethan Carter, you are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Ethan's head snapped up. His mask of calm finally shattered. What? Victoria Sinclair, the judge continued, you are sentenced to 15 years with the possibility of parole after 10. Victoria let out a soft, broken sound, half sob, half disbelief. Ethan twisted in his seat, his eyes burning into her. You did this, he seethed. She ignored him, staring blankly at the table in front of her. I watched them, feeling nothing but satisfaction. The officers moved in, placing Ethan and Victoria in cuffs. As they were escorted past me, Ethan suddenly lunged forward, his eyes wild. This isn't over, Evelyn, he spat. A guard yanked him back, shoving him forward. I met his furious gaze with a cold, steady one. Oh, Ethan, I murmured, just loud enough for him to hear. It's over for you. He didn't get the last word. I did. 1 year later, I stood in the executive boardroom of Henderson & Co., the very company Victoria had once tried to steal from me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had just signed a multi-million-dollar contract, one that cemented my company's dominance in the industry. I glanced at my reflection in the sleek glass windows, remembering the woman I had been a year ago. The woman who had once trusted Ethan. The woman who had ignored the signs. The woman they had tried to destroy. She no longer existed. A soft chime from my phone pulled me back to the present. A news alert flashed across the screen. Ethan Carter and Victoria Sinclair begin their prison sentences. I didn't read the rest. I didn't need to. Instead, I picked up the coffee mug on my desk, hot, rich, completely safe. I took a slow, satisfying sip, letting the warmth spread through me. Ethan and Victoria had lost everything, their freedom, their wealth, their power. And me? I had one. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about moving forward. And never looking back.